We're here now with Adam Mikeal, the Chief Information Security Officer for Texas A&M University. Adam, thanks for being here with us.
Thank you for having me. It's great to join you.
So Adam, you have this super interesting perspective as the CISO of one of the largest higher education institutions in the U.S. And with that comes a lot of challenges and opportunities, I'm sure. Tell us a little bit about what it's like running cybersecurity for an institution like this, and what does it set you up for?
Well, as you said, we are one of the largest R1 research universities in the United States. Right now, our student count is just about at 80,000, and that is on mostly on our main campus, right? Not spread out, not through online students. We do about $1.4 billion annually in research expenditure. It's a very high activity research university. And so there's just a lot here. I think one of the things I tell people is that at a university, we might not have the most of any type of data, but we have some data that falls under almost any data classification type or any federal regulatory schema that you can imagine, right? So we have financial data, we have GLBA, we've got Sarbanes-Oxley, we've got HIPAA data associated with our med school. We have, of course, FERPA, that's the act that governs educational records. We've got DoD research, so we have things like ITAR, and we have export control information. Just if it's there, we've got some of it, even if we don't have the most of it. And so what that does for us is it forces us to deal with this wide range of regulatory frameworks, and we have to be prepared to be flexible to deal with all of them. I think the other interesting thing about operating in an academic environment is that there's something about the nature of academia, right? The very essence of what we do is about openness and sharing and collaboration. So faculty frequently collaborate with other researchers across the United States, across the globe, and it's part of the academic culture to be open and to collaborate in this way. And that somewhat fights against our traditional culture in security, right? Within security, we want to lock things down because that's the easiest path to ensuring that the wrong thing doesn't get put in the wrong hands. But if we do that, if we turn the dial too far and we just say, well, the easiest path for me as the security person is just to turn everything off, lock it all down and say you can't share anything. That directly fights against the purpose for higher education and the purpose for research, fundamental research. And so there's this balance that has to be struck. And to an extent that the cultures between what we try to accomplish in security and the culture of academia are constantly in pressure against each other.
Let's dive deeper into that because I think that's I think every CISO has that balance between being the annoying person in the room that says you can't do this, but what you're talking about is kind of the next level deeper, right? Like
Yeah.
you're really in some ways you need to ignore your gut, right? Ignore your cyber gut to allow students and researchers and faculty to do what they need to do. Tell me more about that balance. How do you approach it? How do you sort of think through that?
That's interesting that you put it that way because I think we build these instincts within the security and risk community around the right way to approach a problem. And uh, yes, I think it goes beyond the idea, we hear this aphorism, the balance between security and convenience. I'm not really talking about convenience. I'm talking about something more fundamental, right? I'd called it a cultural mismatch, and that's because the culture of what happens in academia, it's fundamental to accomplishing our purpose for being here. So if we turn the dial too far, you are literally stopping the reason we exist. And that obviously doesn't work, right? So here's an example. One of the things that I've done since I've been here in my tenure as CISO is that I'm looking at rebalancing how we think about privilege elevation. So admin rights on a desktop. I'm not talking about infrastructure and servers. That's kind of a different thing. We want to really be careful with that. But on, let's say, a laptop that a faculty member uses, the traditional model is lock that down, say no. If you need admin, you put a ticket in and somebody does the thing for you later. That doesn't work when you're a faculty member and you're here in your lab and it's 2 in the morning on a Saturday and they're trying to get something done. They're meeting a deadline, or maybe that's just when the research is happening because that's when grad students stay up, right? And so now suddenly you need to install some code that you downloaded from GitHub that your colleague at another institution has given you. And now I can't do that. That stops work, right? There's like this, it's not just an inconvenience, it's really a delay because now I've got to wait for the next business day for a ticket to be processed. So we've adopted this approach that I call trust users and get telemetry. So as long as I'm getting the right telemetry and monitoring availability to me on the device, right? I have my security agents able to see what's happening. I have become a lot more flexible, allowing our users to click a button and temporarily elevate to administrative privileges. So for a short period of time, they can just do what they need to do, install that printer, change that configuration setting, install some software, and then it falls back down to a standard user privilege model. And during that time, I have telemetry of what happened, so I can watch it. Now, there's a little bit of risk there. Something bad could happen in that short time period, right? I probably wouldn't catch it until a little bit later, but we're getting better and better about watching that telemetry and building, AI models and using automation to watch and automatically detect if something's not right. For the most part, what I try to tell my team is that when we build things in to stop something bad happening, our own employees aren't the bad guys we're trying to stop, right? We need to enable them to do their jobs. We're trying to protect them from the bad actors that are out there.
And I think about you mentioned AI, and I think about it in a slightly different context too, because all we're hearing in our space, right, is how vastly everything is changing and how fast everything's changing. The threats are expanding, the risk profile is expanding. All of that is incredibly, fast moving and hard to deal with for any cyber professional, but especially in the, sort of in that balance that you just laid out. So from your perspective, I mean, what does this look like in this era of expansive attacks and expansive threats?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly see that attackers are using AI to help them model and build attacks and new approaches. We're doing the same thing. All of our vendors and security tools are baking AI in. Of course, in security, I think this is not new to us, right? So before it was called AI, we've seen machine learning and machine learning models being used more and more extensively in our security tools for at least a decade. And so in some respects, we're a little bit ahead of the curve from the rest of the industry here. But one thing that we've definitely seen is that we have to double down on this idea of automating. The volume of attack that we deal with, just in general in our industry, but in higher ed too, right? We have to use automated mechanisms that are using machine learning in order to handle those attacks at that front line. If I'm waiting for a human to see, register, and then take action, I'm already behind. It's too late, right? So one of the things I tell my staff is when you build these detectors, when you build something that's able to look at data and then make some type of alert, we have to run it for some period of time. We have to prove that it's working, that it doesn't have a false positive rate, above some ceiling or floor, that we're comfortable with it. And then we have to automate it and move on to the next one. We can't keep these alerts being something that feeds to a human and a human making the decision. We have to get more and more comfortable allowing the machines to make these decisions and move on. Now, sometimes that decision is take action. Sometimes it's make a decision, flag it for review by a human. But either way, that tier one, more and more we have to push that down to machines because more and more machines are the ones that are launching those initial attacks.
And then, sort of to close this out, Adam, we've got about a minute or so left. The audience here today at the Cybersecurity Modernization Summit is university professionals like you, but also state and local IT decision makers, some federal IT decision makers who are tuning in. What advice do you have for them, and what do you need from them as a university CISO? What does that look like for you?
Right. Well, our engagement with local government and decision makers is often sort of collaborative. We have groups that we work with, sort of local council of governments, if there were cyber attacks, things like that. That works really well for us. My primary engagement with government is with federal and state. So as a state institution, I talk to our state cybersecurity professionals and Department of Information Resources a lot. We're governed under the governance structure that they regulate. And then with the federal, we have federal funding agencies that most of our research dollars comes from. And so we are subject to most of those federal frameworks for how cybersecurity is run. Uh, I think from my perspective, the thing that is most effective and what I would like to see more is just better communication and machine interfaces to get to regulatory information and frameworks, right? So a lot of this stuff is published in PDFs that humans read. In the same way that we're moving past that in some of our attack and response activities and operations, I'd like to see us move past that for compliance as well. We're chasing this idea of compliance as code versus having humans do checklists. So the more that our frameworks around compliance can be encoded in machine readable formats, the better that is for us. We respond to, or we are subject to the NIST frameworks. We use the NIST cybersecurity framework. We build all of our security controls around NIST 800-53. And the ability to get that in formats where we're able to apply that directly to VMs or storage or infrastructure in the cloud, that lets us move faster.
Adam, so much more we could talk about, but I really appreciate you being here with us today, and thanks for sharing all these great insights.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And to our audience, stay tuned for more from today's Cybersecurity Modernization Summit.